In this video, we're going to review using color in Photoshop, and we're going to cover some basic but helpful techniques for using colors, individual colors, as well as color schemes inside of Photoshop. So to get started here, let's create a new document. We'll Command N or Control N on a PC, create that file. And now if we create a basic shape on this document, we'll hit U to make sure our rectangle tool is selected, and then click and drag that out. You'll notice that the rectangle is filled with black. The reason for that is our fill color up here is set to black, and I can click on that fill color and change it to something else. Click on any of these swatches, and even after I've created the shape, you can see I can change the color of it. Okay, let's cancel out of there and undo that. Now, down in the bottom of our tool palette, which we have here is this thin strip, and your tool set may be on the left, it may be over on the right of your layout in Photoshop. I can click this here, all depending on how your workspace has been set up. But your color swatches are always going to be down at the bottom. And these two color swatches are really important. The first one in the upper left part is the foreground color, and the second is the background color. And these are our color swatches or color chips. So by default, they're going to be set to black and white. And that means if we do nothing else, when we create a new shape, it's going to be filled with that foreground color, which is black. So we'll undo that. And if we click on this color swatch here, we can change the hue of the color by moving up and down along this color strip. So this is changing the hue, and once we have a hue that we like, we can change other aspects of the color, the luminosity, the saturation, and we can do that by clicking within this larger square here. So we have a lot to choose from. Once we settle on something we like, we can click on OK, and you'll notice that changes the foreground color. It also changes the fill color up at the top here. So now if I click and drag my rectangle shape, I'm getting that new kind of olive color that I've created. Now if I wanted to change my background color, I can do something quite similar. I simply click on that swatch down below here, and then I set my hue using the color strip, change my saturation, click OK, and now I have a color set in my background area. Now, anytime that I click and drag, I'm always going to be applying my fill color. And the fill color is getting inherited by the foreground color. The background color is still helpful to have on deck here, though. And there's a couple of keyboard shortcuts we can use to access both the foreground and the background. Now, once we've created something, if that layer is selected, we can apply the background color by using a key combination. And on the Mac, that's going to be Command Delete. On a PC, it's going to be Alt Backspace. So we do that, and that background color gets applied. And to apply the foreground color on the Mac, we can use an Option Delete keyboard shortcut combination. On the PC, that's going to be Control Backspace. And doing that will apply that foreground color. Okay, so much for individual colors. What about color schemes? Well, as we've talked about, color schemes are really important aspects of website design. They help us to focus in on a limited set of colors that we want to use, and they help us to pick a set of colors that's going to work well together. Now, as we saw, we can use a website to generate a color scheme. And there are a number of sites that do this. The one that we've been looking at is Color Scheme Designer. Here we are over in Firefox. And on the Color Scheme Designer site, we can click and drag this circle around the color wheel and use that to change the hue of our color. Well, right now we're on a monochromatic rule, and that means that all of the colors we end up with are going to be variations on the same hue. Our primary color, our main color, is always in the center here, and then we have supporting colors that appear around it. If we wanted a little more variety, and we probably do, we should move over to a complementary color scheme, and we can do that by clicking on the complement rule. Now we have our primary color, and we also have our complementary or our secondary color down below. And that's going to introduce a little more visual variety. It's also going to automatically create some balancing between our colors. Reason being that along our color wheel we have warm and we have cool colors. So reds and oranges and yellows are warm, blues and greens are cool. And if we include both in our color scheme, we have a very nice natural kind of balance in our colors. And that's something that the human eye always responds nicely to. So we can click around the color wheel here, select a combination of colors that we like. Let's go with this kind of combination here. And once we're happy with what we have, the question is, how do we get this into Photoshop so we can use our color scheme in Photoshop? A couple of ways to do it, and the easiest one is to export the color scheme. So we can do that by clicking the export option in the menu here. We go down to ACO, which is a special kind of Photoshop file. This is a palette file that includes information about all the colors in the color scheme, and it also includes labels for those colors and makes it really easy to get them into Photoshop. So we're going to click on the ACO option and we're prompted with the download here. We're going to save it as opposed to opening it in Photoshop, so we'll save the file. It's a pretty small file, and so once it's downloaded we can come back to our Photoshop copy here and import it. Now every once in a while on the Color Scheme Designer site you'll notice that you try to download or export your color scheme and it just doesn't work out. You end up with a empty file. That seems to be a bug on the Color Scheme Designer site. Most of the time you'll be just fine. If you have trouble you might just tweak your scheme a little bit and then try again. Earlier on I exported some other schemes, and so let's go ahead and import one of those. It'll be a little different from what we just worked on, but you'll get the gist of it. Okay, back in Photoshop to import our color scheme. We're going to go over to the Color panel and switch to the Swatches tab. So over here on the right, here's Color and here's Swatches. If you don't see this, you can always come to your Window menu, come down to Color and make sure it's checked off. F6 will also toggle it on or off, as we can do that. You got to be careful on a Mac though, because those function keys can sometimes be mapped to other controls. Like in this case I'm on a laptop and it's controlling the brightness of my keys. But we can always of course go to our menu and then click on over here. So we'll come to Swatches and we're seeing one of the default color palettes loaded in here. Quite a few different options. Well, let's say we wanted to load our custom color scheme. To do that, we can click on the Properties menu here, attached to the Swatches tab. That's going to open up a drop-down list, and we're going to come down to Replace Swatches. This option here, Replace Swatches. We'll click on that, and we can come in now and select our color scheme. I'm going to go with one that I downloaded earlier, which I know is working fine. And we'll see right away that all of our colors, all of our swatches have replaced the ones that were in there. And so now we have really easy access to all of the colors in our color scheme. And the way we can get to use these is by clicking on them to select the color, and that's going to set that color as our new foreground. So if I click on this color here, for example, you'll notice my foreground color updates. I can flip my foreground and background, and then I can click on a different color and make that the foreground, and then I can flip back again. So now I have these two colors from my color scheme in my foreground and background color chips down here at the bottom. And using those keyboard shortcuts, Command Delete, I can apply, for example, my background color, or Option Delete, I can apply my foreground color. And now I can start to access the colors from my color scheme. Now, one quick tip in working with color on a design. It's very easy for a website design to become overly saturated in color. And what happens is the design starts looking kind of dark. So it's important to maintain a lot of white space on a design, to not forget that both white and black are additional colors in a sense that we can tap into and use in our designs. So even in this very crude drawing here, it almost feels as though there's too much color. So if we come into our free transform tool and we just scale these down a little ways, I'll come over to my rectangle and do the same. Okay, again, a very crude and basic example, but Here, it begins to feel as though the colors are in better proportion with the rest of the design. So one thing to bear in mind as you begin applying colors to your site is to use them in moderation, and also, as best as you can, stick to your color scheme. Okay, let me show you one more way to generate a color scheme. It's using a different web-based tool, and it's called Kuler. And this is a tool that's actually part of Adobe now. So we can go to kuler.adobe.com. This is actually built into newer versions of Photoshop, but regardless of which version you have, you can always come to the kuler.adobe.com website. And you can pick from any number of pre-established color schemes. We've got a pretty nice scheme here, for example. Users submit their schemes and then they're voted up and voted down. We're going to come into the Create option, though, and see how we can create a new color scheme using Kuler. So we have a set of rules, just like we did on ColorSchemeDesigner.com, and we can go to monochromatic. We have a few additional options here, analogous. We're going to come down to complementary once again. And here we have our 5-swatch color scheme. This is a little different because we don't have the 10 swatches that we got from the Color Scheme Designer, but we still have a complementary theme. And we can still click and drag around the color wheel to change the base color, which in turn changes all of the other colors in the scheme. Now, the interesting thing about Kuler, though, is we have more flexibility in how we move around the color wheel. So not only can I select different hues, but I can move my base color inward here, and I can change the saturation of these colors. And that opens up a whole new range of possibilities with my color schemes. In some cases, a less saturated scheme is going to look a lot better on my site. Now, not only can I move everything all at once by changing the saturation of my base color, but I can click on any of my other individual colors, for example, on the far right here, and I can change the saturation of that one color by moving that one circle inward or outward. Now, once I'm happy with my results here in Kuler, how do I get them into Photoshop? Well, we could sign in, create an account, save our color scheme. Let me show you another way to get colors into Photoshop, though, and that is based on the hexadecimal value. Remember, the hexdec value or hexadecimal value is a 6-character value that uniquely represents a given color. And it's a great way for both Photoshop and CSS to understand what color we want to work with. So I'm going to select the color for this darker red, this kind of burgundy color here. And here's the hexdec value, so I'll click in there and select that value. I'm simply going to copy it out of Kuler, and we'll come back into Photoshop. Now, within Photoshop, I have my color scheme set up here with my swatches, and I can add additional swatches to this color scheme by clicking on the Create New Swatch. And that's going to create a swatch based on the current foreground color. So what I want to do is to click on my foreground color, and in the hexdec space here, represented by the hash mark or the hashtag, I can select this value, clear it out, and paste in the one I copied from Kuler. I'll click OK to confirm that. And now I click to create my new color. I'm just going to call this from Kuler since that's where we got it. Click OK. And my new reddish color here is now part of my color scheme. If I change around to a different color and I start working with that, I can always come back. Whoops. You'll notice that the fill hasn't changed even though I updated my foreground color, but I can always come in here and apply the color, or after I create it, I can set my color using my keyboard shortcut here and apply that foreground, so I'll do that. Now I can always come back to my new color by using the eyedrop tool. Now it's my foreground color, and I can set something up and then apply that foreground color. So there's a really quick tutorial on some very basic ways of using color in Photoshop and importing color schemes.